Hello everyone, welcome to Global Government News. Today is Sunday, January 16th, 2011, and I'm Darko. Welcome everyone to part 3, the final part of this economic news bulletin. I usually ask new listeners to, check out my website. It's www.ggnonline.com. Again, that's ggnonline.com. So we're just going to move into this next article. This is where we left off. Over 1 million Americans seen losing homes in 2011. And we're going to keep moving. Housing market stalls amid lending fears. The housing market has stalled. Figures show as lenders warn that lending criteria will remain tight for borrowers. Mortgage rates declined to 4-week low. Home mortgage rates declined for a second straight week, according to data released Thursday by Freddie Mac. But the housing market continued to face headwinds from a supply glut. And it says here the struggling employment situation. Next up is Singapore tightens housing curbs after prices reach record, stocks tumble. Singapore will raise down payment requirements for second mortgages and extend the period homeowners must hold properties to avoid a sales tax as it steps up efforts to curb speculation after prices rose to a record, it says. And here up is the Wall Street Journal. Big property tax increase on the horizon. And it says 7.5% rise for co-op owners, 9.6% for condos. City denies charges that assessments were raised to boost tax collection. Co-op and condo owners will pay sharply higher property taxes next year under a preliminary assessment roll released Friday by the Bloomberg administration. The city attributed the rises due to take effect in July to higher market values placed on apartment buildings by tax assessors. So you can check that out. It says owners of single-family homes would pay 2.8% more. And says taxes on rental buildings often passed on to tenants will also increase significantly, the report said, by 9%. So next up is from Forbes. It says U.S. banks reporting phantom income on $1.4 trillion, and I think we already covered that, so I'll cross that out. Sorry. Brown seeks 5-year extension of California taxes. This is from the AP. Governor Jerry Brown proposed a budget Monday that would slash funding to most areas of state government and maintain a series of tax increases for 5 years to close California's huge budget deficit. Next up is out of Illinois. Illinois income tax increase still evolving. Democratic leaders are still looking to raise Illinois' income tax to close a potential $15 billion deficit. So instead of allowing more people to have more money in their pockets and cut their taxes and let it spur the economy that way, let jobs be created because more people, more businesses have money to spend on hiring workers and investing and growing. No, they want to increase the taxes that will basically stifle any growth. It makes no sense and is counterproductive, but they want to do it anyways, right? And you think they're going to lower the amount of cops and all that? No, actually, Rahm Emanuel, the next mayor of Chicago, actually, yeah, he will be. Basically, he was calling for more cops, basically more police on the streets. So there you go. And where do you think this money's going to come from? From the tax hike. Governor, and they'll cut social services. Governor Quinn promises to quickly sign Illinois tax hike. Well, thank you, Governor Quinn. God, we were worried about it when you were going to pass it. Illinois Governor Quinn defended a massive increase in state income taxes passed by lawmakers Wednesday and promised to quickly sign the measure to help heal the state's ailing finances. So whatever they got to do, cut programs or whatever, I mean, it sucks. But like I said, they'll cut the social programs, they'll leave all the police state, all the bribes, the lobbyiness, and all the useless programs. They'll leave those going, but they'll cut the programs that actually help people. And it's totally unconstitutional to tax people's income. I mean, think about that. The people in the 1800s in America would be rolling over in their graves if they would have ever thought that they would not only be taxed for sales tax, not only be taxed for some kind of retirement tax that probably won't be there, and then they're going to be forced to pay a healthcare tax. And then they're going to be taxed on their income. I mean, they would be astounded by this, but people they just take it, man. They just take it. So anyways, turning in tax cheats to become more profitable. And this is to be expected, right? Because like I said, this is all just a bunch of crap, right? So you got this tax system which is totally illegitimate in my eyes. It's 10 times the size of the Constitution, which just lets you know what, a Constitution to run a country, and then you need about of 1,000 to 100,000 pages of code in order to run this tax system, because it's so invasive and it's just so in depth, right? It touches throughout all the facets of society and the economy, and that's why the IRS is up there with one of the most powerful institutions in the world, besides, of course, the banks themselves and the CIA and the NSA, so and the Pentagon. So yeah, says that the IRS service is making it easier for whistleblowers to collect rewards for turning in big-time tax cheats. The agency proposed new rules Friday to jumpstart a 5-year-old program designed to entice people to snitch on businesses or individuals trying to bilk the government out of $2 million or more in taxes. See, bilk the government. No, they want to be left alone, and they want money to reinvest into their own company because, well, it's their blood, sweat, and tears that they're putting into it, and they want to see some goddamn results. They want to see some growth. In order to do that, they need the money that they earned to be able to have it in their pockets to reinvest it. So if you give that money away to some black hole bureaucracy, you're never going to see it again. All you can do is just sit there and go back and suck their phallus for some subsidies or tax breaks, right? And that's what statism is all about. That's why I say end statism and quit the rhetoric, quit this left-right crap. It's all a joke. Could Britain be heading for a crash? We cannot postpone indefinitely the final acceptance that we must live within our means. And it says here, World Bank sees 2011 economic decline. The World Bank has warned that the rate of global economic growth will slow down in 2011, with emerging markets growing much faster than developed economies. I wonder why. It's called a transfer of wealth. It's basically part of the Communist Manifesto, so that's why we have trading blocks, just like Marx and them talked about. So, I mean, it's a mix between communism and fascism, a mix between, basically a steered economy and then kind of your free market economy. So, next up is what chance a U.S. default, that's just weird the way they said that, but it was the most startling of warnings. If the U.S. does not get its finances in order, quote, we will have a European situation in our hands, possibly worse. And it says right here, the big fear is that if no action is taken, investors might eventually punish the U.S. for its fiscal laxity. That would raise borrowing costs for businesses and consumers, force severe austerity measures, and risk social unrest. Not only America's AAA rating could be threatened some point to consequences in foreign affairs and defense as well. Mike Mullen, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff last year, warned that the debt pile could limit the flexibility of the U.S. in funding its military, in his eyes the most significant threat to our national security. Well, I think it's a crap, right? Because I think if we don't need a standing army and we don't need a government. So it's just so much money that is stolen from people, and like it goes down the black hole. And the black hole is that military-industrial complex. Includes the big pharma complex, the banking complex, the security complex, defense complex, the agro complex. It says here, could the U.S. central bank go broke? The U.S. Federal Reserve's journey to the outer limits of monetary policy is raising concerns about how hard it would be to withdraw trillions of dollars in stimulus from the banking system when the time is right. You can check it out. The links will be posted. U.S. leads in income inequality. Swiss National Bank may post record 2010 loss as Euro slump cuts reserves. Next up, IRS proposes requiring U.S. banks to disclose accounts owners. Check this out, guys. It says here, the Obama administration says U.S. banks could disclose to the IRS bank accounts owned by foreigners, resurrecting a Clinton-era proposal that was opposed by banking groups and Republicans. The IRS proposed regulations on the 7th that would pave way for the U.S. for the first time to routinely share information with other governments about their citizens' deposits and U.S. financial institutions. Says the move is designed to help governments around the world pierce bank secrecy. The agency said it follows a successful 3-year effort by the U.S. to pressure Switzerland and its biggest bank, UBS AG, to reveal the U.S. owners of undeclared accounts held offshore. And I mentioned this before. This is usually to crack down not on the big guys, the Goldman Sachs, the Bank of Americas, the Chases, and all those other banks that are pretty much insolvent and are relying on government stimuluses, bailouts, and all that, and basically carrying out fraud on a global scale. those ones won't be touched. But this is for those individuals that may have profited from the Ponzi scheme that these individual corporations carried out. So there's people that profited from them, and those are the people, the little guys that may have made $1 million or maybe a couple billion off of this scheme because they had some kind of inside information about when the bubble was going to pop. And so those guys that put their money offshore, that's who they're going after, the guys that weren't supposed to profit from this. And it's a very, very fine line between privacy and secrecy, right? I think they should have the right to their privacy, right? So is this on banks only, or is this on individuals as well? That's the question. Exclusive: America has reached the point of no return. Reagan budget director says, or warns, the Obama administration's $78 billion cut to U.S. defense spending is a mere pinprick to the behemoth military-industrial complex that must drastically shrink for the good of the public, a former Reagan administration budget director recently told Raw Story. So there you go. That is the solution. Scale down the military. Geithner says U.S. insolvent. It said Geithner sent a letter to Congress on January 6th asking for the debt limit to be raised. If it is not raised, he warned the U.S. will default on its debt, in his own words. And it says here the U.S. government is insolvent, who says Timothy Geithner, U.S. Secretary. So that's basically what he's saying. Fed turns over a record $78.4 billion profit to the Treasury. And we're going to keep moving here. Inflation picks up at British factories. The cost of raw materials at British factories rose at the fastest rate in 8 months in December, posing a headache for policymakers tasked with keeping inflation under control. So interest rates could rise by June. Interest rates will start rising again by June, much earlier than had been expected, after a surprise jump in inflation, a move that would help Britain's 38 million savers. Bernanke says higher interest rates reflect improvement in the U.S. economy, and there's some people out there that would beg to differ. I've heard of the kind of the mechanism as far as economic policy and lending and interest rates goes is the Federal Reserve artificially keeps interest rates low so they can give the illusion that there's people borrowing. And so I don't know, how this works, but, basically if there's higher interest rates in a semi-free market, high interest rates would signal that nobody's borrowing. So I don't see how that can be an improvement. Someone out there that knows more about the economy, if you want to explain that, break it down to me. I'm always open-minded, man. I don't know. I'm not like the greatest economic wizard here. I got my degree in journalism, so I'm a journalist, a writer, and not an economist, but I try my best. So Bank of England keeps short-term interest rates at record low. So there you go. Bank of America announced Thursday that it kept its short-term interest rates at a record low, 0.5%, and maintained the size of the asset purchase program. So they're doing the same thing, right? Greece's long-term debt rating are cut to junk by Fitch. So how about that? Greek government opens way for privatization of state-run companies. So there you go, guys. That's how it all starts, right? IMF receivership. France and Germany veto increase in EU rescue fund. And they're talking, look at that face, man. Talk about tension, man. Look, some funny little expressions. But, yeah, so European ministers consider boosting bailout fund. And see, ooh, look at that, the currency block. Yeah, they're talking about setting up a permanent bailout fund. Wow, that sounds very free market. Look up the definition of corporatism. If you've never if you've never seen the definition of corporatism, check it out, and you'll see why that is a big sham. This permanent bailout fund, because that's what corporatism is. It's basically a permanent bailout fund. Now it's just legal, and the people will be used to it, and they won't be surprised. British budget may need EU approval to help shore up the euro. Next up, record 14 trillion plus debt weighs on Congress. Already know about that. South Africa becomes full member of BRIC, which is Brazil, Russia, India, and China. So now South Africa. Manufacturing, logistics see job gains. Next up, factories see job gains and output. Sales production gains point to pickup in growth. Iran, Pakistan agree on 5-year trade deal. Chinese companies eyes Boise as economic power shifts to Asia. Idaho's location makes it prime site for an industrial foothold. British TUC talking about trade unions to stage anti-cuts protests. U.S. Army deploys troops to escape cuts. They're sending soldiers and keeping them over there because If they bring them back, they'll cut the military's funding. How about that? That's a bunch of bull. Health cuts to cost North Ireland 400 jobs. Bank of America restores online banking system. And when these Bank of America Chase banks go down, it's nothing more than a bank holiday, guys. Remember that. Wells Fargo, it's all a bank holiday. This is GGN. I'm Dark.